Good day, everybody. First, I must return the compliment to the mentor, Professor Rabinovich, with whom I wrote my PhD on Lebanon, and I have very fond memories about my work with Itamar during the period in Washington and while I was the diplomatic advisor of Prime Minister Rabin. The subject of this presentation right now is what are we facing today in the Middle East? Almost 5 years after the outburst of the so-called Arab Spring, the Middle East is still experiencing tectonic and dramatic changes that are shaping its landscape into unexpected realities. Those 5 years have witnessed every unimaginable drama that no analyst could have ever dreamt of. Arabs fighting Arabs, Sunni Arabs fighting Iran and Iranian-backed troops and political forces, Sunnis fighting against Shiites, disintegration of nation-states, shifting alliances with the superpower, Western and Russian military intervention, Arab, Turkish and intervention, dominance of Russia, and slow disappearance of US influence. Moreover, Arab military intervention has been there to assist failing fellow states, unsuccessful in quelling internal rebellions. And then we have elimination and persecution of Muslim sects, disappearance of Christian communities, almost war between Russia and Turkey, and the rise of political Islam on the ruins of former nation states. As a result, hundreds of thousands of civilians have been killed, and hundreds of thousands more injured. Phantom cities have been created, millions displaced, and hundreds of thousands of refugees have fled to foreign lands. In the name of Islam and in order to spread the word of God, all this has been orchestrated by social media, exporting terrorism and panic to the world, and of course, presenting and disseminating horror videos of mass decapitation, children-led executions, drowning in pools, crucifixion, chaos, and slave markets. In a new Islamic State, there is no room for teaching history, for teaching mathematics, for teaching the music. We teach only Quran according to the Salafist doctrine. So where do we stand today? The Sykes-Picot division of the Middle East into two spheres of influence has been replaced by another dividing line. The northern Middle East is dominated by an Iranian Shiite alliance stretching from Lebanon to the borders of Afghanistan. And the southern Middle East is led by Arab Sunni moderates. The Sykes-Picot lines enabled two leading colonial powers, France and Great Britain, to draw the borders of the different states in the Middle East. It took the intervention of another outside power, the US, a newcomer to the region, to destroy the order that prevailed for almost 100 years. France and Great Britain as colonial powers have disappeared and are replaced by two other powers which are reshaping the Middle East, the US and Russia. The current American administration has lowered its profile in the Middle East and is accused by its traditional Arab allies of having abandoned them and instead backed the Iranian regime. As a countermeasure, the moderate Arab states that for the past 70 years have been allied with the US-led Western alliance have chosen to partner with Russia militarily and economically. This is despite the fact that Russia has committed itself to fight with the Assad regime against those same rebels that receive assistance and finance from the so-called moderate states. Ancient regional powers have surfaced again. Turkey and Iran are dominating the Syrian-Iraqi scene. For Turkey, it's a comeback, while for Iran, it's a deepening of its historical presence in the area. Turkey, led by Erdogan, the Muslim brother, has been instrumental in assisting the Salafist organizations in North Lebanon and the rebels against Assad at the price of almost a military confrontation with Russia, while Iran has been fighting the rebels with Afghani proxies and Revolutionary Guards volunteers coming from Iran. Furthermore, Turkey has established a military base 32 kilometers north of Mosul in the Bashika region, which is situated 150 kilometers deep into Iraqi territory. where, so it says, it trains Kurdish Peshmerga to fight the Islamic State. This, of course, does not prevent Turkey to fight the PKK inside and outside its border and prevent the Syrian Kurds to establish a physical junction with their Iraqi brothers. One should not also forget that Turkey's involvement in Egypt, where it has been accused of assisting radical Islamists in the Sinai in their fight against Sisi, the Egyptian president who is conducting an all-out war against the Muslim brothers in Egypt. The so-called Arab Spring has proven that the Arab states have not succeeded since their independence in creating nation-states. Those nation-states that should have rallied around one common goal, one common vision. Most regimes have been maintaining themselves through repressive laws, failed ideologies, military junta, minorities ruling majorities, corrupt leaders, leaning mainly on their own Praetorian guards. On the other hand, the Islamic radical forces which tried to hijack popular uprising failed to do so in all of the Arab world, with the exception of the rise of the Islamic State in Iraq, which is the direct result of the second US occupation of Iraq. What is left today of the old order? The 2016 Assad regime controls barely 30 to 40% of the previous Syrian Republic. Assad is at the mercy of his saviors, and his regime is totally dependent of the decision makers in Moscow and Tehran. His liberty of maneuver is almost inexistent. Whatever scenario unfolds in Syria, Syria will not return to be the former spearhead of Arabism in the Middle East. Moscow and Tehran have become the guarantor of Syria's Alawite regime and decided that the ultimate solution should be the partition of Syria into federal states. Syria's western neighbor, Lebanon, has been without a president since 2014. The whole body politic is paralyzed and no compromise seems to show at the horizon. Had it not been the fighters of Hezbollah, the Syrian civil war would have overflowed into Lebanon. More than any past proof, this has served to be for Hezbollah masked as a Lebanese freedom fighter organization has been ripped off. It is crystal clear today that Hezbollah is an Iranian entity controlled and commandeered from Tehran. The so-called Lebanese freedom fighters have given place to a sectarian Shiite organization dedicated to the service of Iranian interests in the region. Hezbollah has even duplicated himself into several entities: Hezbollah Syria, Hezbollah Iraq, Hezbollah Yemen, Hezbollah Saudi Arabia. And in fact, now Hezbollah, having done so, he is well aware that the Sunnites in Lebanon, who identify themselves totally with the fate of their brothers in Syria, are waiting for an opportunity to strike and defeat it in Lebanon. However, as we talk about Lebanon, one should stress that on the one hand, that Lebanon's territorial integrity is guaranteed today by Hezbollah and the Lebanese army who fight together on the Syrian-Lebanese border. On the other hand, Hezbollah is blocking the issue of presidential elections by preventing the meeting of a quorum in the parliament of Lebanon. Hezbollah has chosen his candidate, Michel Aoun, and is adamantly opposed to any alternative. In the meantime, the country is run by a caretaker government who could in fact last for a long time if there is no dramatic change in the equation of forces. As for Iraq, Iraq is struggling in its quest for self-identity. A year and a half after the Islamic State stormed Mosul and almost cut Iraq in half, Iraq is trying to recover and to retake lost territory to the Islamic State. Iraq finds itself partly invaded by Turkish forces in the north, as I said before, and de facto partition between an autonomous Kurdish government in the north and the Sunnite territory led by ISIS, whose capital is Raqqa. And finally, we have a Shiite state which extends north of Baghdad till the borders of Kuwait, Iran, and Saudi Arabia and the south. The partition of Iraq is indeed on the table, as many US policymakers and decision makers have expressed lately. As to the Islamic State issue, it seems that under the joint attacks of the Russian and Western military coalition led by the US, the Islamic State is feeling the crunch, and thousands of its fighters have been killed or decimated by the air raids. Between brackets, 30,000 fighters. It took the United States, Russia, the Arab world, and it's not defeated yet. Of late, indications lead to assess that the Islamic State is looking for a possible alternative to Raqqa in the failed state of Libya and in Afghanistan, where they are fighting the Taliban. About 20 to 30 areas of East Afghanistan are now under the rule of the Islamic State. The growing Islamic State presence in Libya has lit red lights in Europe and the US. Of late, the possibility of a military Western and Russian military intervention in Libya has become closer to reality than before. And far under the radar, and for almost a year, another conflict opposing Sunni Arabs and Arab Shiites backed by Iran has been unraveling. For more than a year, Saudi Arabia has been leading an Arab military coalition against the Houthis in Yemen with very little success. However, even with the participation of allied Arab armies, including Egypt, Sudan, and the Emirates, the Saudi campaign achieved very little in military accomplishment, and at this point in time, it seems that the war in Yemen has reached a stalemate, and it could last with no clear ending in the next future. In fact, Saudi Arabia itself is facing a double threat on its regime. Both threats are initiated by outside factors. The first one is initiated by Iran, using the Shiite population in Saudi Arabia as a means to destabilize the kingdom. And the second one is inspired by Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Saudi Arabia is experiencing an unprecedented period of domestic instability due to terrorist activities carried out by Saudi recruits who joined the jihadi efforts to destabilize the kingdom. On the other bank of the Red Sea, Saudi Arabia's ally, President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah Sisi, is fighting also the jihadist tide. Never in its modern history did Egypt face such a tumultuous unraveling of events. No doubt that the domestic scene is the main issue Egypt is forced to confront. The Muslim brothers, far from conceding their defeat, are trying to topple the regime. And the regime encounters severe humps on its way, especially since the ill-fated decision taken in April 2016 to hand over the two islands of Tiran and Sanafir to its so-called previous owner, Saudi Arabia. The regime has become nervous and retaliates by limiting the liberty of expression. Draconian laws are enacted in Egypt relating to the liberty of the press, and the government makes no secret of its zero tolerance to criticism, thus transforming what had been promised as a roadmap to democracy into a roadmap to military dictatorship. 5 years after the outburst of the so-called Arab Spring, the Middle East has changed radically. 5 years from now, what kind of Middle East can we expect? It would be foolish to prophesize. However, it would not be adventurous to say that we will be witnessing the drawing of a new map, with new entities born or reborn, a new diminished Syria, a new divided Iraq, a Kurdish state, a Lebanon split into 2 or 3 cantons, a 2-state Libya, and a Saudi-dominated Yemen. The clash between radical Islam and Arab nation states has not ended. One should look at Egypt, North Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula as the next arenas for the next years. Sisi is conducting a survival war against radical Islam. Algeria conducted a bloody war against radical Islam at the cost of more than 200,000 victims in the 1990s. In the aftermath of the demise of Bouteflika, who is very ill right now, one should expect tremors in the state initiated by radical Islam. While facing thousands of volunteers who left Morocco and Tunisia. By the way, Moroccan and Tunisian are the biggest contingent of volunteers in the Islamic State, and they went to fight with the Islamic State. Morocco and Tunisia are fighting radical Islam and trying to maintain their political identity. However, unlike Iraq and Syria, the territorial integrity of those states is not questioned. Except for Libya, the changes, if they occur, will be internal, transforming the nation state into a state dominated by radical Islam. One key element in this presentation is the future of Saudi Arabia and some petty states of the Persian Gulf, such as Bahrain. As stated above, Saudi Arabia is under attack both internally and externally. whereas Bahrain's Sunni minority is still ruling only because it's supported by Emirati and Saudi expeditionary forces. What would be the outcome of an Iranian Shiite regime in Bahrain is to be seen, whereas the fall of the House of Saud would definitely affect not only the Middle East moderate regimes, but the world order as a whole. Realizing the threat to their regimes and in their quest to fight radical Islam, Arab moderates led by Saudi Arabia and Egypt are trying to reorganize and establish a joint military force capable to intervene rapidly in zones of conflict. They have enacted laws similar to the American and French Patriot Acts and adopted draconian measures that have limited the political liberties in their respective countries. Because of this realignment, I believe that in this equation there is no room for the vision of the Islamic State, a caliphate stretching from Morocco to China. The traditional Arab national forces will continue to dictate the character of the nation states, even if they transform into Islamic regimes and become regimes similar to the one that ruled in Iran. This does not mean that the jihadist Salafist ideology will be eradicated and that jihadist cells will stop from being established. Unless the roots of the problems are not dealt with, meaning the financing of religious institutions, the jihadist movement will continue its symbiosis with the finance institutions receiving their funds from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, and even Morocco. Thank you very much.